So to follow all that up, I got two things for you. One, if Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck or whoever it was, that guy, he looks like it, he walks like it, he talks like it, that's a franchise quarterback. Does Ryan Poles keep the number one pick and take that guy, yes or no? Read it. Albert, good morning. How are you today, my friend?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
We are doing great. We are excited. The Bears sit at number 9, but I want to talk about the trade that got them from 1 to 9. You had a chance to sit down with our general manager, Ryan Poles, and the headline says Bears GM never told Justin Fields he's their quarterback, but his decision on March 10 did. So what did Ryan tell you about the whole process?
No, it's interesting because, he tried to be as transparent as he was as he could be with Justin. And he took me back to that thing last April where he let him into the draft room and showed him, hey, if we don't take a receiver, here's why. If we don't take an offensive lineman, here's why. And of course, in the second round, they wind up taking Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker. And so, I think the whole purpose was, it wasn't to make Justin Fields or give Justin Fields like decision-making power. It was to make him feel like a partner. And, I think, Ryan's experience with, both Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City informed him on that and how to handle a quarterback. And, that these guys just want to be updated and just want to know what's going on. And, he basically said to me, he's like, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do that. So, that was sort of the backdrop for the whole thing. And then, they get to the middle of January, the season ends. And, I think they were as transparent as they could be with Justin and saying they were going to go through the process. But they loved a lot of things that he did. They gave him areas that he had to improve on based on how he played in 2022. And I think, it gave Justin some confidence that unless they ran into something that was, in his words, special, that they would move forward with Justin as the quarterback. And that was the reason why I think they sort of held back. It's like that was the other thing that I think the Mahomes experience sort of informed Ryan Poles on was that, that was what Kansas City was waiting for in not drafting a quarterback high for the first 4 years that Andy Reid was there. And it was their 5th draft when they wound up going up for Mahomes. It was, they were waiting for something that would just blew them away. And, I think Justin, they feel like he's got the ceiling to potentially grow into that. But if something came along that was already that, then they would have to, obviously think about it. So, that's sort of like, I guess, the soup to nuts, a recap of the way the whole thing went between the general manager and the quarterback there.
You mentioned the special comment that Ryan Poles made, and I want to go back to something I heard you say with Kaplan J. Hood. Maybe it was a couple months ago about how some of these teams at the top of the draft might be looking to next year's quarterback class.
Yep.
Is that something you still feel is possible from like Houston looks at this draft and they go, hey, we got a new coaching staff. We don't want to tie ourselves to a short quarterback in Bryce Young. Maybe we'll just wait until next year.
Everybody's convinced Houston's taking one. But I mean, maybe that's why, they got a little, they got some cold feet at the very end. And when the Bears were considering the double trade, it's possible that's part of the consideration. I certainly think that that's something that a lot of teams are going to be looking at. And I know of a couple already that, when they went into their, off-season work and, the All-Star games and then the draft meetings, had their scouts look not just at this year's quarterbacks, but look at, Drake May from North Carolina and Caleb Williams from USC as well. So, I think that's the idea there would really be, like you said, you don't want to tie yourself down if you're not 100% on a guy. And if you have the job security to wait a year, and you feel like the quarterbacks that will be available in 2024 are exponentially better than the ones that are available in 2023, well, then that's something to consider. Then the flip side is, guys, and I think, this is one thing that we all have to think about in these situations is you don't know how 23 is going to play out for the quarterbacks that are still in college. You know what I mean? So things can oftentimes look a lot better a year out than they do when, it's staring you in the face and there's 2 months until the draft. So, I think that that's something certainly to consider here. But the way that NFL people talk about both Caleb Williams and Drake May, I don't think it's, like Trevor Lawrence, but certainly, I think it's maybe like just a notch below that, where those guys, the comparisons you hear, and it doesn't mean they're as good as these two guys, but, the comparisons you hear as far as just who they are athletically, you hear Caleb Williams compared to Patrick Mahomes, and you hear Drake May compared to Andrew Luck. So, again, that doesn't mean they're going to get there, but physically they've got just about everything that you'd want.
Okay, so to follow all that up, I got two things for you. One, if Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck or whoever it was, that guy, he looks like it, he walks like it, he talks like it, that's a franchise quarterback. Does Ryan Poles keep the number one pick and take that guy? Yes or no?
I think so. Yeah. But those are rare. Like, that's the other thing. And again, there are players like the Chiefs were incredibly high on Mahomes. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, and they went all the way up from 27 to 10. So there are cases where and this is a credit to the people who are in Kansas City. Then there are cases where there's one or two teams that's like, that guy, and we're not going to tell anybody we feel this way, but that guy right there is as good as anybody I've seen in the last 5-10 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
But, just as far as like the consensus, the names you use there, Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck, that's like once in a decade. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you're talking about the consensus and, doing all the work that I've done over the years in the draft and, covering the league and everything else, I think since I was born in 1980, there are 4 quarterbacks that stand apart: John Elway, Peyton Manning, Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck. Like, just in the way that they were talked about before the draft, the consensus on them as players and who they could become. And the fact that all 4 of those guys were seen as having very, very high floors. I think that's what it is. It's like the combination of high ceiling and high floor, that put those 4 guys sort of apart. So if there was one of those types available, yeah, I think that the Bears would probably do it. But those types are exceedingly rare.
Okay, so Adam and I have had this discussion. I still believe Poles is taking this slower approach. He's going to roll some of the money over into the 2023-24 offseason. And look, no one wants to lose. He's not waking up going, boy, I hope we go 1-16 and get the number one pick. But he's okay if they go 6-11, 5-12. I still think they're the worst team in the division. They just have a huge upside coming because of all the draft capital. Where are you on the Bears in this division today?
I think that they're probably still an off-season away. And I think that's the right way to build based on where they were. I think last year was really, and they didn't want to say it at the time, but, like a big part of last year was about getting out of the cap mass, and so they ate all the dead money. And that's why they have so much money this year. And part of it is they just didn't have that many players in their roster that you'd want to re-sign, it's almost always that way. When you see a team with a lot of cap space, go look at their drafts from 3, 4, 5 years ago. You know what I mean? There's like usually no one there. And the reason they have cap space is because all that money that would have been earmarked to go to guys that they drafted 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, like they're not spending it on those guys, So, I think that they're a full off season away. And, I think, what you hope again is that you got a team that sort of comes on at the end of the year, and you got a lot of good young players that are ascending over the course of the year. And you got a quarterback who's getting better over the course of the year. And I think the ideal situation, guys, like, we're talking a lot about Caleb Williams and Drake May, right? If you were like 5-12 or 6-11 or whatever, like, wouldn't the ideal situation to have like Justin Fields playing great, and then you're in position to draft Marvin Harrison,
yes,
top 5? Wouldn't that be a better scenario than having to spend another piece of capital on a quarterback? I don't know. That's the way I see it.
Albert, is there something in your phone specifically about Lamar Jackson that maybe we don't know yet? Well, because there hasn't been anything. Like, free agency started, was like, oh, there's going to be offers and all this kind of stuff. There hasn't been any noise about Lamar Jackson whatsoever. Is this going to come down to like a draft day trade or something like that?
No, I sort of touched on this, and I do think So I think the one thing that people aren't paying attention to is the rules. Okay. So the rules are that, like, you know, you have to give up your next 2 first-round picks. Well, like that changes once you get past the draft. So, you know, you get to May 1st and now all of a sudden you're talking about your picks in 24 and 25. Most teams get past the draft and they feel pretty good about themselves, right? So there are very few teams that get past the draft and think, oh yeah, we're going to be drafting in the top 10 next year. You know what I mean? So like if you're, say, the Colts, right? And say you're not wild about this year's quarterback class, you know, would you look at it and say, you know what, let's spend the 4th pick on Will Anderson, right? And let's get past the draft, and then let's sign Lamar Jackson after the draft. And we've got a creative offensive coordinator in Shane Steichen who helped bring along, or a creative offensive play caller in Shane Steichen, who comes over after being Jalen Hurts' play caller in Philadelphia. And we get past the draft, and now we don't have to give up the 4th overall pick. And if we have Lamar Jackson, we're going to be pretty good, right? So you figure maybe that pick is now the 20th pick instead of the 4th pick, right? So, like, that's the one thing I don't think enough people are paying attention to is the way the rules work. There could be some teams drafting high that get through this process and say to themselves, we're not wild about the quarterbacks. And, oh, by the way, like if we sign Lamar Jackson to an offer sheet in May, we're giving up a pick next year, which if Lamar Jackson is on our team might not be a very high pick anymore.